These are my top 10 picks for the 2024 NL Rookie of the Year. Note these rankings do not represent my long-term outlook for each of these players, just how I think they'll perform in 2024. Number 10, Michael Busch, Chicago Cubs. Michael Busch just got traded to the Cubs, essentially for 20-year-old pitching prospect Jackson Ferris. Even before that trade, though, I had Busch as number 10 on this list because of his upside. But now that he's more likely to receive playing time, I feel much more confident about his floor as well. Busch is a masher. He doesn't really play defense very well, though, and his two best defensive positions were already occupied by Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts, respectively, on the Dodgers. So with the Cubs, he'll most likely play first base while DHing as well, with the possible spot starts at second and third. But with Busch, it's all about his bat. He hit 61 home runs over the past 2 years, and all but 2 of those came at AA or AAA. And those other 2, well, they were actually with the Dodgers last year. He had a 27-game taste in LA, but he only hit 167 in that opportunity. He's a former first-round pick from the 2019 draft, so Busch is already 26, meaning he's older than some of the international posted players, Yoshinobu Yamamoto and Jung Hoo Lee. So this also means that Busch is going to feel the pressure to succeed this year. He's older. He was traded, and that trade was probably more of LA shopping him around rather than the Cubs inquiring about him because of LA's roster crunch. And if Matt Mervis rakes in spring, he could put more pressure on the Cubs to give him some playing time over Busch if Busch isn't hitting well. So Busch should understand that this is a make it or break it year for him. And often guys in that situation that have mashed in the minors do succeed in the majors. So I'm big on Busch possibly hitting 275 with 30 home runs as the Rookie of the Year. Number 9, Drew Thorpe, San Diego Padres. When the Padres traded away Juan Soto, they knew what they wanted in return. Big league ready pitching. And while Michael King was the bigger piece of that deal, Thorpe is the one who is still eligible for Rookie of the Year, and he should get his shot in 2024. To wow you, let's take a look at his whip in AA last year. 0.66 to go with a 4-0 record and a 1.48 ERA. Oh, and 44 strikeouts in just 30 innings while walking just 5. I mean, sure, it's a small sample size, but those are elite numbers. He's a big guy at 6'4", 215, but he actually doesn't throw that hard. More average, if anything, with a killer changeup. And while having a pitcher-friendly field in San Diego, along with a solid defense behind him, I don't think it would be too much of a stretch to get numbers like a 12-8 record with a 3.48 ERA and a 1.05 whip with 158 strikeouts in 140 innings. Number 8, Noelve Marte, Cincinnati Reds. First off, I know some people are immediately going to react, what? Marte 8th? How is he not in the top 5? He definitely has the upside to win Rookie of the Year, so absolutely. I don't mean to downplay his ability. He absolutely had a great cup of coffee in the end of last season, batting .316 with 3 home runs in 35 games with the Reds. I just wonder about his role with so many other great young players that have been up a little longer than him and maybe pushing him down to 6, 7, or even 8 in the lineup. I also do worry about him finding a defensive home, again, with so many similar players. And in the end, I just really like the other 7 guys ahead of Marte on this list. So numbers that I see him reaching, maybe a 255 average with 18 home runs, maybe 15 stolen bases, but with modest RBI and run totals, again, based on him hitting maybe lower in the lineup and perhaps not getting as many at-bats or even starts. Number 7, Yuki Matsui, San Diego Padres. Yuki Matsui might be the least known Japanese pitcher to make the move over to MLB this season, but he'll have as much of an opportunity to succeed as anyone. Matsui was signed by the Padres as a back-of-the-bullpen arm, and he should get an opportunity to show that he can close in the majors, a role that he was accustomed to in Japan with 39 saves last year with a 1.57 ERA and a 0.89 whip while striking out 72 in 57 innings. The Padres have been dumping salaries this offseason by trading Juan Soto and Trent Grisham, while gladly watching Michael Wacha, Seth Lugo, Nick Martinez, and Luis Garcia sign elsewhere, and probably ditto for Cy Young winner Blake Snell and top closer Josh Hader. So with an obvious opening for a closer, Matsui was signed to a 5-year deal for $28 million. Now, that's a bargain for a closer, but probably not what you want to spend on a middle reliever. The Padres still have righty Robert Suarez, who could compete for saves, but Matsui should be given every opportunity for saves, especially if he can get righties out from the left side, which he was effective enough to do in Japan. I would expect some growing pains with the new league, but I still think he does post about a 5-3 record, let's say 22 saves, 8 holds, and a 3.10 ERA with a 1.22 whip. How about 75 Ks in 58 innings? Number 6, Cade Horton, Chicago Cubs. The Cubs definitely need some pitching, and unless they're able to land Blake Snell or another top arm, expect them to suddenly become more optimistic about Cade Horton's season. He was seen as a reach by many, taking 7th overall in the 2022 draft, but others say that he was gaining a lot of late traction going into the draft. Horton was a bit of a late bloomer as he wasn't drafted coming out of high school, but that was in large part because of the 2020 draft, which was only 5 rounds because of COVID-19, and he was pretty much committed to going to Oklahoma, where he was going to play both football and baseball. Now, football didn't really work out for him as there was just too much competition at quarterback, and then he ended up getting Tommy John surgery in 2021. So he was also a two-way player as both a pitcher and a third baseman, so he was spread pretty thin when it came to focusing on one thing and doing just that great. His ERA in his draft year was actually 7.94, but in the postseason, he was a different beast, absolutely dominating hitters and leading the Sooners to the finals. And that was enough to shoot him up on draft boards, with the Cubs so far being rewarded for their investment with ace-like numbers in the minors. Horton is just one of those jocks that are just good at everything, and it's that competitive will to succeed that will lead him to major league success, perhaps as early as 2024, where I expect he'll compile numbers in the 10-5 with a 3.3 ERA, perhaps a 1.25 whip, while striking out 145 over 130 innings. Number 5, Jung Hoo Lee, San Francisco Giants. When you commit over $100 million on a player, you have expectations for that player. And so clearly, the Giants have expectations for Jung Hoo Lee and would probably like to have him hit 1, 2, or 3 in their lineup. Lee is a contact maniac from his days in the KBO, where he's won 2 out of the last 3 batting titles, and it could have been 3 in a row had he not missed half this past season with an ankle injury. Power-wise, his career high from home runs was 23, and that was in his MVP season 2 years ago. Other than that, though, his home run numbers are quite modest, averaging around 10 home runs per year. But do note that pitchers throw a lot slower in the KBO. So with greater velocity comes greater exit velocities. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jung Hoo Lee eventually hit for more power, especially if he bulks up his 6'1 frame. But for his rookie season, I see him trying to stick with his bread and butter, which is hard line drive contact with lots of doubles. So I'm going to predict for Lee hitting around 285 with 9 home runs and 12 stolen bases. I would also expect around 90 runs, maybe 75 RBIs if he hits 1 or 2 in the order, which I would expect. Masataka Yoshida finished 6th in American League Rookie of the Year voting last year, and I could see similar results for Lee, who would be a considerable younger version of Yoshida with maybe a little bit more long-term upside if he bulks up some power. Number 4, Jackson Chourio, Milwaukee Brewers. I remember drafting Jackson Chourio in the 50th round of my Fantasy Baseball Dynasty League startup draft. That was back in February of 2021. I would eventually end up dropping him because of a roster squeeze that year, and then I drafted him again in 2022, 125th overall in our first-year player draft. That's right. Nobody wanted him even then. And of course, it was that summer that he really broke out. The reason I liked him before his breakout was his all-around game. Power, hitting ability, speed, as well as a good walk-to-strikeout ratio, which was basically 1-to-1, while already showing power and speed potential. As an 18-year-old, the year after he skipped complex ball and basically dominated low A and high A before finally being somewhat challenged at double A when he was basically 5 years younger than everyone else, he set off the prospect alarms everywhere. He showed even more power that year, but he also faced tougher pitching and his strikeout numbers climbed as well. Now, Chourio has demonstrated patience before, which is why I'm confident that his hit tool will play in the majors even at the age of 20, which he will be for the duration of the upcoming season. Numbers I expect him to put up in 2024 is about a 245 average with 23 home runs and 38 stolen bases. I think his runs and RBI totals, though, could be just average unless he gets off to a really good start and forces them to hit him in the top 3 spots of the order. But I would conservatively expect him to bat probably in the bottom 3 for a good portion of the year, but probably not the whole year, as I'm sure he'll adjust eventually. Number 3, Jordan Lawler, Arizona Diamondbacks. Just like how Corbin Carroll was called up to the majors late the year before and then went on to win Rookie of the Year, Arizona is hoping that formula works for Lawler as well, who was called up in August of 2023. Lawler should undoubtedly start the season as Arizona's starting shortstop after getting the late season call-up. He didn't hit very well in the majors, but his minor league numbers and pedigree point to being the best bat on the roster among possible shortstop, and he's defensively sound as well. I think Lawler is actually a lot like Jackson Chourio with his power-speed combination, but for 2024, I'm going to favor Lawler for being a couple of years older while being a bit bigger as well for a tiebreaker. But honestly, I see them putting up almost identical numbers in their first year, although I do believe Chourio has a bit more upside long-term speaking. Number 2, Paul Skenes, Pittsburgh Pirates. He's considered the best pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg, who was drafted first overall by Washington back in 2009. And I remember when Strasburg was drafted, and he was basically seen as the greatest pitching prospect ever in that draft. I mean, that's the comparison. Count me in on Skenes if that's what we're talking about. Skenes is also taller, bigger, stronger than Strasburg at the same point of their careers. His stuff is basically just as good, but his control might be a notch below Strasburg's. But I also think his injury risk is much safer. His fastball is elite in the triple digits with a nasty slider. Skenes just got drafted last summer, so it's possible that he doesn't start the season with the Pirates, but I think as long as he has a decent spring training, say an ERA under 4, I think he tries to earn the Pirates that extra draft pick. As for his numbers, I would bet on something like a 10-12 record with a 3.80 ERA and a 1.15 whip while striking out 185 over 155 innings. He did struggle in his first taste of Double-A, but we're talking about two and 2/3 innings of a sample size. So expect that to be just a blip for the rest of his resume. His greatest hurdle might be getting some run support and maybe even average defense behind him, as he'll be on a young, inexperienced Pirates team that's trying to develop all together. All right, let's get to some honorable mentions. I mean, with any list like this, there are going to be people asking about certain players, so let me name a few of the obvious ones that I believe will have great careers, but just not as high on them for this coming season. James Wood and Dylan Cruz of the Nationals. I love both of these guys, but I just wonder if either of them will be ready to be on the roster come opening day. And since the Nationals aren't going to be competing anytime soon, it really doesn't make any sense to rush either of them for a service time standpoint. Why not just promote them the year after when they'll have an even better chance to win Rookie of the Year and earn the team an extra pick? Ethan Salas, catcher for the Padres. Yes, he is amazing and doing unprecedented stuff for a guy that young at the catcher position. But the reality is he still needs more time for such a complex position with framing and calling a game on top of throwing out runners and, of course, hitting. So the obvious cooler on Salas was the Padres acquiring Kyle Higashioka in the Juan Soto trade to back up starter Luis Campusano, who could be primed for a breakout anyways. Meanwhile, teammate Jackson Merrill still has too much in his way unless the Padres do indeed trade Ha-Seong Kim or Jay Cronenworth before the start of training camp. Pete Crow Armstrong still doesn't have a job yet, and even if he does make the team, I'm still not sold on his ability to hit immediately, although I'm sure he'll be a solid player for years to come, especially defensively. I just don't see him being that big in 2024. And one more honorable mention goes to Giants pitcher Kyle Harrison. Simply walks too many batters as far as I'm concerned. I know he didn't in his major league debut, but I've got to see it for longer to believe it. All right, let's go to my number one choice for 2024 NL Rookie of the Year. I think it's pretty obvious and, in all honesty, a little bit unfair. It is Yoshinobu Yamamoto of the LA Dodgers, and I believe that Yamamoto is in a tier of his own. I mean, the amount of experience that he has at a high level of baseball compared to each of the other prospects is simply unfair. And then to have dominated that competition by as much as he does, I mean, it just gives him so much of an edge that I would think only an injury of some sort would really derail him. In a full season, I would expect him to go 16-7 for the Dodgers with a 2.75 ERA and a 1.05 whip while striking out 200 over 185 innings. I might even be selling him short with predictions like that. Not only will Yamamoto be the favorite for Rookie of the Year, but I expect that he'll receive votes for the Cy Young Award as well, if not be a finalist for the award, and it honestly wouldn't shock me if he won it. He really is that good. To be totally honest, It is unfair that Yamamoto is even eligible to win this award, sort of like how Ichiro Suzuki won AL Rookie of the Year as well as MVP back in 2001 after winning 3 straight MVPs in Japan. I mean, come on. But at the same time, a lot of the Japanese players that have come over through the posting process have not won Rookie of the Year. The only others to do so being Shohei Ohtani, Hideo Nomo, and Kazuhiro Sasaki. So, who do you think will be the National League Rookie of the Year in 2024? Do you agree with this ranking? And if not, who else should have made this list? Rant your comments below and let's talk about this more. Also, be sure to like the video if you did enjoy the content and subscribe to the channel to be prompted with more insightful baseball content like this. Thanks for watching this till the end.